In this video, we're going to show you how to set up a Raspberry Pi 4 from start to finish. Let's get started. What I have here is a starter kit for Raspberry Pi. This company, Labis, has sent me this kit which should provide everything we need to use our Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to just open it and crack into it.
So this tutorial is going to cover a couple different scenarios. So if your SD card does not have NOOBS pre-installed, we'll cover that. And if you don't have a keyboard or a mouse, we're going to cover that as well.
So I'm just going to go ahead and set this all up. So let's take out the housing here. Alright, we have some additional screws, so we don't need to necessarily screw it all in place right now. Let's put the micro SD card in. So this is our 32 gigabyte micro SD card. We're going to slide it right on in. Okay. And I think that's all we need. The name of Raspberry Pi comes from a tradition of naming computer companies after fruit. Personally, I can only think of Apple, but apparently there were a lot of other microcomputer companies that were named after fruit. Okay, so it kind of snaps into place there. And now you can see there's like a proper outlet for all the ports, which is really cool. I'm not going to put on the fan yet because I may want to take this out at some point and play around with it. I'm not even going to screw it in. I'm going to just go ahead and we're going to try to turn this on and get it running. Okay, so I've hooked up a keyboard, I've hooked up a mouse, and now I'm going to go ahead and turn on the Raspberry Pi and it should boot up. Okay, it says please wait while NOOBS initializes. NOOBS is like the installer program. And from here we can select the disk image that we want to use as our operating system. I'm going to do Raspbian full. But before that, I'm going to do a couple other things. So I'm going to select the language, keyboard US, that looks good, Wi-Fi. I'm going to find my network and I'm going to connect to it. Alright, we want Raspbian full, so I'm selecting this. I selected language, I selected keyboard, I connected to my Wi-Fi network. So we're going to move on and just click install. This will install selected operating system. Yes. OS is installed successfully. I'm going to click OK. It's going to automatically reboot and hopefully it should start up with the Raspbian operating system. Okay, welcome to Raspberry Pi desktop. Before you start using it, there's a few things that you need to set up. Okay, I'll just walk through this. Country, US, time zone, New York. Okay, so out of the box, the Raspberry Pi's root password is Raspberry. I'm going to leave this for now because I don't want to change it right now. The desktop should fill the entire screen. Tick the box below if your screen has black borders at the edge. Select your Wi-Fi network. I actually already did this, but maybe you have to do it again. So yeah, Yoda. The operating system and applications will now be checked and updated if necessary. It is large download. Okay, so we're just updating the packages and the operating system. Okay, so we just finished updating the operating system. It says system is up to date and it's prompting us to restart. So we will do that. Okay, so it readjusted the screen size, which is nice. So we should be good to go. We are on my network here, and we should have internet access. Let's just try this out. This is the out-of-the-box web browser. I'm sure you can download Chrome or some variant thereof. Or maybe this is Chrome. That's cool. So I should be able to go to reddit.com. Okay, nice. What else can we do? Well, we can download software, we can run programs. If we're interested in the command line, we should be able to do stuff. So, yeah, we can create a file, touch test.txt. Yeah, so we can navigate via the command line or through the web browser. Let's see what other programs are installed. Okay, so some IDEs. Let's see. Like an Office equivalent, so you have a spreadsheet, text editor. That's cool. VLC media player, open source media player. Some games, Minecraft, Python games. So really this is it. Okay, so what if NOOBS did not come pre-installed on your micro SD card? Maybe you bought your micro SD card directly from Samsung or whichever provider you used. Well, in that case, we're going to want to install the operating system directly onto our micro SD card. You could install NOOBS onto the micro SD card and then use NOOBS to use the graphical user interface to install Raspbian, but we can skip the step to install NOOBS and just directly install Raspbian. So that's what I'm going to go through right now. Okay, so again, I'm going to be using this micro SD card reader. This came with our kit, but it's USB-C, which my computer does not have direct support for. And this is the 32 gigabyte micro SD card. Okay, so I just inserted my micro SD card, and you should see this new boot removable drive. I don't know if you're going to see this recovery thing. I think this is because I already installed Raspbian on this, but just you'll definitely see this boot drive here. So the next step is we want to download the Raspbian operating system that we're going to use. So I'm going to do incognito window, and I'm going to say Raspberry Pi Raspbian download. And you should probably get this off of the raspberrypi.local website just to ensure that it's what you're looking for. Okay, so we have light, desktop, and then recommended with desktop. So let's see here. Alright, so let's do this one here. I'm going to download it as a zip file. Okay, it looks like the download's ready. So let's actually format our micro SD card. So I'm going to do disk utility. I'm looking for this guy. Okay. So ensure that you have the right drive selected. You do not want to pick the wrong drive because you'll be deleting everything. So I see here this is my micro SD card. It's 30 gigabytes. It has some stuff already on it just because I already installed NOOBS. We're going to go to erase. So we're going to select the FAT file system, file format. I'm going to put RP4. And we're going to go ahead and erase. Okay, so we just formatted the hard drive. So now to get Raspbian onto our micro SD card, you don't have to use a tool, but I like to use a tool called Etcher because it's just really straightforward. It's ETCHER. You can download that off their website. It's free. There's no ride-along software or anything like that.
And I don't know, I just think this is the easiest way to do it. So I am loading up Etcher, and it's so easy to do. All we do is select the image. So this is the Raspbian image that I just downloaded. And then we select our drive. It's right here. And then we just say flash. Okay, it looks like the flash is completed. So we are going to close out of Etcher. I am going to take my micro SD card, insert it into my Raspberry Pi, and try to boot it up. Okay, so we just inserted the micro SD card, hooked up all the peripherals, turned on the power, and now you can see we have the welcome screen again. So we would just step through this wizard here and we'd be good to go. So formatting the SD card and directly installing Raspbian is pretty straightforward.
So what if you don't have a keyboard or a mouse and you still want to get your Raspberry Pi up and running? Well, you can do that. Now this is kind of for the more technical folks out there who are going to be interacting with their Raspberry Pi via SSH and via the command line. So you really, in order to do this, you're going to want to be comfortable in the command line, but you can start up, boot up your Raspberry Pi without any peripheral devices. You'll connect to it from your laptop and you can start programming remotely. So I'm going to show you how to do that as well.
When we format our micro SD card, we're going to enable SSH, which is not enabled by default. It's a security feature. We're also going to immediately provide our LAN Wi-Fi credentials so that the moment the Raspberry Pi turns on, it's going to immediately connect to our network. And once it's on our network, it becomes available for remote connection, which is what we'll do. We're going to SSH to it, and then once we're SSH'd onto that device, we're controlling that device. Again, controlling it from the command line, which requires, you know, that requisite knowledge of the Linux command. But for a lot of developers, that's sufficient for their own development. And if you're kind of in a pinch and you don't have a keyboard and mouse and you still want to set it up, we can do that. So I'm going to grab my micro SD card. We're going to go through the same process of formatting the micro SD card, using Etcher to write the operating system onto the card, and then we're going to tweak the config, and we should be good to go. Okay, so we've formatted the micro SD card. We've used Etcher to write Raspbian onto it. Now we might have to reinsert the micro SD card and the card reader in order for this boot to show up, but this ultimately is what we want in a window finder, because we're going to now tweak the configuration so that A, SSH is enabled, and B, we automatically connect to our Wi-Fi network. So there are two files needed to do this. They are going to be in the description. You can just go ahead and download them. And so I'm going to open another Finder window, and they should be in my download. All right, there's one called SSH, and all we have to do is drag this into the root directory here. And that file is literally just a file called SSH that has no content. That serves as a flag to enable SSH. The next file here is the wpa supplicant.conf. We also want to drag that into the root directory, but we want to also edit that. And what we're trying to do is provide our network credentials. So let's see here. So we want to provide the SSID, which is our network name, and then the PSK, which is just the Wi-Fi password. So for me, my network name is Yoda-6, and I'm going to just type in my password here, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. So one little caveat, for the Raspberry Pi Zero, out of the box it doesn't support 5G connections. So if you're going to go through this process on the Raspberry Pi Zero, you need to make sure that you're connecting to a 2.4 gigahertz connection, or anything less than 5. And then after you make your initial connection, you update the firmware, and then it will support 5G. For Raspberry Pi 4, I don't know if it supports 5G on the initial boot. my network here, the YOTA 6 network, is a hybrid, so it's supposed to identify if it should use 2.4 or 5 based on the client. But that's something to keep in mind. So if you have trouble with a 5G network, move it over to your 2.4 network and try that out. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file, and then I'm going to just eject the removable drive here, which is my card. And now we're just going to put our SD card into the Raspberry Pi and then reboot the Raspberry Pi. That pop-up says SSH is enabled and the default password for the Pi user has not been changed. This is a security risk. Please log in as the Pi user. So that means that our SSH flag has worked, and that you would be able to connect to this device using SSH. Now I'm going to dismiss that. I am going to ignore that and come over to Wi-Fi. So look, it's automatically connected to our Wi-Fi network. I didn't do any configuration. It's just automatically connected. And we should have internet. Let me just illustrate that. Okay, so SSH is turned on and Wi-Fi is immediately turned on. Now I'm using a keyboard and mouse to show this to you, but the point is that was all true prior to me having the keyboard and mouse connected, and I didn't need the keyboard and mouse to run through the user interface in order to turn those things on. So now the question is, how do we connect to it? How do we connect to it and perform some of the programming that we want to do? Okay, so we've confirmed that the Raspberry Pi has SSH enabled and is already connected to our Wi-Fi network. So in the case where the Raspberry Pi is just on right now and there's no peripheral devices connected to it, we can still connect to it and program to it. So I'm going to open a terminal here. And so the host name for Raspberry Pi is called raspberrypi.local. And since we're both on the same network, I should be able to ping it. So I'm going to do ping pi at, I'm going to do ping raspberrypi.local, which is the host name. And it helps if you spell it correctly. So it's returning ping messages, which means that there's a device there and it's able to receive network traffic. So let's get a little bit more in depth here. So I just opened up my Xfinity home network page here, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a refresh. And what I'm expecting is that it should show this Raspberry Pi device connected to my network. So here are all my devices. I have my Amazon. Okay, so it just took a second there, but so this is it right here, Raspberry Pi. So I can take a look at it, and so I can see, okay, there's a new client connected to my Wi-Fi network, and that's what I expect. So just another way to kind of validate that everything's working correctly. So, all right, so how do we program on it remotely? Well, we connect to it via SSH. Okay, so to connect to it, we're just going to do SSH pi at raspberrypi.local. And it's making a secure connection, so it's going to create an RSA and store that locally. We'll just do yes. Now the password is always Raspberry by default. We should probably change that, but for now we're not going to. Now one thing I like to do is right now my user is Pi. Well, I want to have full access, so I'm going to do sudo su dash, and that elevates my current terminal access to root. So that means I can do like anything I want. So I can create a program, I can run scripts, I can execute files. So like I could do like curl www.google.com. So I just requested google.com's homepage, and it sent me back a bunch of HTML. I can look at all the running processes on my Raspberry Pi. I can kill them, I can start up new ones. I could, let's see here, if I go into home, there should be a folder called desktop. So there's nothing here. So because I have my Raspberry Pi hooked up to a monitor, we can kind of see what's going on the user interface. even though I'm controlling it by the command line. So something I could do is, like, I could create a bunch of files and they should show up on my desktop. So if I do touch1.txt, touch2.txt, you can see these files showing up on the Raspberry Pi. So, like, the graphical user interface is nice, but a hardcore coder programmer really doesn't need that. And so maybe they're using the Raspberry Pi to look at Wi-Fi networks, and it doesn't need a user interface. Or maybe they're using it to look at Bluetooth devices and monitor airwave traffic. These are all things that are possible that don't require any sort of peripheral devices. The Raspberry Pi just needs to turn on, and it can kind of hang out, and maybe it executes like some JavaScript, Python, or Bash commands, and that's all that's needed. The graphical user interface is more for the folks who fall into like the personal computing segment of Raspberry Pi customers. But that is how you set up a Raspberry Pi without any peripheral devices. Anyways, guys, I hope this tutorial was helpful. Thank you for listening.